So this is a little bit different, a different way to start, but let's do it. So go ahead and set yourself up. And there's lots of different ways to do this. One way is just to come to the top of your mat and build up your blocks. Okay, so the feet are going to be at least hip width, maybe wider. The knees are going to be soft. And you're going to find a place to rest your upper body. Now, you could also do this on a chair or on the side of your couch. You know, if you wanted to be up higher. You could also, if you were near a wall, you could lean on a wall and use your blocks. Okay, you could also do it this way. Okay, so lots of different ways. I'm just going to do it on my mat with my cat because, you know, that's where she's at now. And we're going to soften the knees and just let the upper body drape forward. Okay, so starting in a standing forward fold, a supported standing forward fold. So make sure you have some support. And then as you settle in, you know, it takes a moment to find that sweet spot, that place that feels just right. So you want to have, you know, sensation, but we also don't want it to be too much. We're finding that balance between effort and ease. And then allow your eyes to close and just bring your attention to the soles of your feet. And just feel where the soles of your feet connect to the ground beneath you. And then start to feel that you are standing in a balanced way. So notice if you tend to sink in the heels or if you tend to grip in the toes. And see if you can find a place where you feel balanced front to back. And then in that same vein, see if you can find balance, not just front and back of your feet, but inner and outer foot. So the inner arch and the outer ridge of your foot. So we're searching for that sweet spot. Okay, balance on the feet. Hips somewhat above the ankles. And then also, you know, we're looking for a little bit of ease. So can you soften your shoulders down your back? Maybe you can feel your body starting to want to fold a little deeper at this point. You know, we've been here about, I don't know, 2 minutes now. Can you find a little more release in your head and your neck? Can you feel that your upper body is tractioning your legs? We're going to stay here just about 1 more minute. And just notice how the sweet spot of your practice or your posture, that it can be fluid. So meaning that it changes. The longer we stay in a posture, the more fluid it becomes, really. And so maybe we release a little more, or maybe we back out a little bit the longer we stay. Let's see if you can tap into locating or finding or exploring where it feels just right to land in your posture. A few more breaths here. So big back body stretch, but also an inversion to start our practice today. Just one more breath in. One more breath out. And then from here, just start to walk your hands up onto your blocks. You know, just finding a little bit of length in the spine. So like a halfway lift. Just leveling out a little bit. And then just as easy as you can, you're just going to bring one knee down and then the other. Okay, and we're just going to head into child's pose. Okay, and your child's pose can be supported if you want it to be, or you can just come into child's pose without support. So you decide what feels good. And then just settle in and feel your body land on the ground. You can decide if you want your knees to be apart or together. You can rest your forehead on a block, your belly on a bolster. And just give yourself a little time to drop in here. So our first posture was, feels a little intense to start with. So just let that settle in. Few more breaths here. One more breath in. One more breath out. And from here, we'll start to glide forward to hands and knees. And just start to find some movement here that feels just right. So moving through some cat and cow stretches. And just adding any intuitive movements to your cat and cow stretches. It might feel really good to kind of linger in the cow pose, opening up the front of the body. You know, so we started off with a lot of back body release. And so just paying attention to the stretch of the belly. And a couple more movements here. And then if you have blocks, it might feel good to hop your hands up on blocks here. So we're going to move into a box stretch, which is similar to lizard, but we're going to take out the hip flexion stretch. So step the left foot forward to start. I'm just going to move my blocks so you can see, but my hands are going to go on the inside of my left foot. But I'm going to keep these right angles. So in lizard pose, we would sink the hip forward, but we're not going to do that. We'll get into the hip flexors later. So this is really about my left hip. And I'm going to bring my blocks to the inside of my left foot. And just let my upper body kind of start to drape forward. So this is all about the left hip. The left inside of my left knee is touching the outside of my left shoulder. And I'm just holding this container of my pose. So there's a little bit of activity in the left inner thigh. And there's going to be a whole lot of stretch in the outside of the left hip. The right leg is just stabilizing my pose. It's helping me balance. And then you can decide whether you want to stay up with your arms straight, or maybe you can start to find a place to lower onto your forearms. And you're just going to explore this fluid sweet spot that keeps changing through your practice. Okay? And the only way you can find that is to be present. Okay, so we drop in and we consciously place our attention on the sensation in the body. And we stay and we observe. And we get familiar with ourselves. Notice where you can bring more ease into your body. Can you soften the belly? Can you soften the space between your shoulder blades? Can you let your head hang so that your neck can release? Let's stay here just a few more breaths. You might even notice that in addition to the left hip, maybe you feel some opening happening in the lower back. Slowly begin to press back up if you're folded forward. And let your hands come back down to the mat. And you could do either, you could come back to hands and knees and explore some cat and cows. Or you might even want to take a downward facing dog here. Totally up to you. Okay, so you decide how you bring yourself back to neutral. And as you explore those postures, you can add in any variation here. I'm taking my feet kind of wide and down dog and just moving the hips from side to side. And we'll all end up back at hands and knees. And it might even feel good to drop the hips forward a little bit, finding a little release in the front of the hips. It's really soft and fluid. And then when you're ready, we'll come back to hands and knees, and maybe you'll bring your hands back up onto your blocks if you're using them. And we'll step the right foot to the outside of your right hand. Okay, and then arrange your legs. So you want the knees, right knee is over right ankle, and left hip is over left knee. So you've got that squared position. Right knee is going to stay in contact. The right inside of the knee is going to stay in contact with the outside of the right arm. And then from here, you can decide if you want to fold forward a little bit more. And then just be open to the possibility that this might change. Okay? The sweet spot that we find first is not always going to be the same. It's probably going to change over time. So see if you can commit to just being open to that, to staying with the practice, to being awake enough to notice when you can maybe move a little deeper, or maybe being open to when you need to come out of it a little bit. Use your breath here as an anchor. We watch our breath. We notice sensation. Notice if your sweet spot has shifted. Do you need to change your placement? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Just honor where you're at in your practice. And notice where you can bring more ease. So probably not in the right hip. That is pretty active. But maybe you can find more ease in the space between your shoulder blades. Maybe you can find more ease in your lower belly. Maybe you can loosen your jaw, your neck. Let's take just about 3 more breaths here. And then slowly slide back to hands and knees. You can stay at hands and knees. You can move around. You can press up to downward facing dog. Explore your variation of release, of coming back to neutral. Let it be your expression of the pose. And then we're going to come onto our belly next, and you can come into your belly however you want to get there. And we're going to land in Sphinx. Okay, so aligning elbows under the shoulders. You can wiggle your hips from side to side and let your feet splay out a little bit. And then it might be nice to have a block between your hands, just as a place to kind of catch your forehead. Okay, so palms are pressing down. And then just for a few breaths, press your palms down and just find a little length in the front of the body. So let it be active for just a few breaths. And then from here, start to sink into your shoulders. And you can let your head tip forward. And maybe you just rest your forehead on the block, or you can let it hang even. We're just going to stay here and let the front of the hips and the belly and the lower back just relax into the stretch. So the elbows are just under the shoulders here. Just stacking and then allowing our body to rest in the stretch. So hips and lower belly are all resting on the ground. We'll take just a few more breaths here. And then go ahead and fold yourself all the way down on your belly. You can rest your head on your arms if you want, or just on your mat. And bend your knees and just take a little bit of windshield wipering side to side. And from here, bring your forehead back to the mat. And we're just going to ease ourselves back up to hands and knees. And we'll set up for a puppy pose for a couple breaths, or sometimes we call this, I think it's heart melting pose. So my hips are above my knees. They're up in my hips are up in the air. Palms are reaching forward and pressing into the ground, or you could press your hands on blocks also. And your forehead may or may not come down to the ground. Just opening the upper back, the side body, and the armpits. We'll be here just another breath, and from here we're going to move into a twist. So keep your right hand pressing down, slide your left hand back, and thread it to the right. So coming into thread the needle, keeping the hips high. So breathing into the space between the shoulder blades. And just feeling rotation from the navel up. Getting a little upper body opening before we head back into our lower body. And then slide your right hand back. And press yourself up to hands and knees. And take just a couple moments to come back to neutral, however it feels appropriate for you to come back. And then when you feel ready to move to the other side, you'll find your puppy pose, and then you'll thread your right arm under. Just coming right into your twist on the other side. And then again, be open to this sweet spot, this not too tight, not too loose concept as being pretty fluid. Okay, it changes all the time. All right. So practice being awake here. Okay, we don't settle in and then zone out. We settle in and we stay awake so that we can notice when we need to shift, when we need to back off, or maybe when we want to move deeper. We'll take just a few more breaths here. And then take your time as you come back to center. Come back to hands and knees. And give yourself some transition time to notice what you need to do to find your neutral spine again. And then when you feel ready, you'll come into a comfortable seat. So once you come to a comfortable seat, you can decide whether you want to fold a blanket so that your hips are higher than your knees. And that's optional. I'm actually going to grab my bolster and just sit on the edge of my bolster so that I'm just lifting my hips and tilting them forward just a little bit. That's just an option. And from here, I've got my right ankle in front of my left ankle. So we call this Sukhasana. And then I'm just going to start to walk my hands forward. Okay, so it's just a cross-legged seat. And I'm just going to take it slow, one hand at a time. You might want to have a block handy if you want to rest your head. And I'm just going to look for that sweet spot where you can feel the outside of your right seat. It's just a little outer hip, a little outer seat stretch. And you might want to stay still in this posture, or maybe it feels good to add a little bit of swaying. Totally optional. We're going to be here just about 8 more breaths. Just paying attention. How can you make this posture not too tight, not too loose? Let's take one more breath here. And then slowly start to walk the hands back in one at a time. And let this be a mindfulness practice, really feeling where the palms of your hands connect to the ground. So you're sitting all the way up. And then lean back, just feeling the shoulders on top of the hips. And before we go to the other side, let's just stretch the legs out, coming into a straddle. Okay, so you can decide how wide you want your legs to be. And maybe now, if you don't have something under your sitting bones, maybe you want to lift your hips up a little bit. Another option would be to bend your knees. You could do this with bent knees. You could slide blocks under your knees or a rolled blanket or a pillow. And from here, we're just going to walk the hands back forward and return back into our forward fold with the legs wide. Okay, so the feet get to be soft here. This is a passive stretch. And just notice the sensation on the inseam of your thighs. And see if you can find that just right place to land in for a little while. Notice if you want to be more still or if you want to add a little bit of swing. Totally up to you. And be mindful that, it changes. So noticing when you need to back off. Noticing when it would be beneficial to ease back in. Stay here for about 5 more slow breaths. And slowly start to lift yourself back up. Ease yourself out of the posture. You can bring your legs back together. Maybe even just like lean back on your hands and shake your legs out. You want to lift your hips up if you think that might feel good. That's an option here. You could windshield wiper. Just let it be intuitive. Yeah. And then as you come back to your seat, we'll cross the left ankle in front. So just coming into that Sukhasana with the left ankle in front of the right. Sometimes you call this easy seat, although it's not always easy. So sometimes I kind of hate to call it that, because depending on what your hip feels like on any given day, it doesn't always feel easy. So once you find your posture, then you can decide whether you want to stay upright or whether you want to start to fold your upper body forward. Okay, and if you're folding forward, consider walking your hands one at a time, really letting it be a mindfulness practice of easing into the posture, feeling the ground beneath your hands, and searching for that first sweet spot where you can land for a little while. Feel the space in your lower back from your tailbone up to your rib cage and all around. See if you can breathe into that space. So in addition to opening up the left side of the seat, the left hip, there's also a lot of space that we can create in the lower back here. Let's take about 5 more breaths here. And slowly start to lift your upper body back up. Good. So you can lean back just a little bit. And we're going to set ourselves up for a restorative chest opener. So you could use a bolster or a rolled blanket. So if you're using a blanket, you're just going to want to roll it like a Tootsie Roll so that it can go along the length of your spine. Okay, so I'll just show that. Okay, so it would go like this, and you'd lay down on it. And if you had a bolster, you could use that instead of the blanket. So you want to make sure that the blanket or the bolster comes right up against your tailbone. And then you're just going to lay back, letting it support your spine and your head. You may want to fold the blanket at the end to give your head a little lift if you need it. And just open your arms out like a T, and you can keep your knees bent here. So we're just going to stay here for a little bit. And the sole purpose is really just to open up the chest, open up the whole front of the body. We did a lot of forward folding today. And I just wanted to give a little bit of extra attention to the front of our body. Okay, so if this is really comfortable for you and you think it might feel good to do soles of the feet together, knees open and bound angle on your back, you can go into that. You can also just keep your knees bent, or you could straighten your legs out. Okay, so you can decide where you want to land in this posture, what feels best in your body. And then settle in. We're going to stay here a couple of minutes. Okay, so really make sure that you are set up in a way that is supported for a few minutes. And then let your eyes close. And really start to connect to the idea of your body being supported. See if you can really connect to the sense that you don't have to do any work in this posture. You can just let your body get heavy and trust that the props that you have underneath your body and the ground beneath you is going to support the weight of your body. So you can completely release. We've got about 8 more breaths here. If your legs are extended or if your knees are out to the side, slowly bring them back in so that your knees are bent. and moving toward one another. And then gently ease yourself onto your side. And just rest for a moment on your side body. So from here, we're going to move into a supported bridge. So you could use your rolled blanket or your bolster or your block. I'm going to switch to my bolster here. So I'm going to come onto my back, knees bent. And from here, I'm going to lift my hips and slide my prop under the lowest part of my back. Okay. So just keeping it, as simple as possible. Our spine is resting on the ground. Our pelvis is elevated on whatever prop you're using, knees bent, soles of the feet on the ground. And then you can decide here, if you want to get a little more opening in the hip flexor, you could extend one leg. Okay, you could do one leg at a time. Or if you think it feels okay in your lower back, you could do both legs. Now for me, in all honesty, this feels a little pinchy in my low back. So I'm just going to do one leg at a time. If you have just one leg extended, you'll want to start to switch legs and extend the other leg. So the leg that's extended is heavy and resting on the ground, just allowing a nice gentle opening in the front of the hip flexor. So you're really just allowing gravity to assist you in the opening of the front of the hip. It's a really nice, gentle way, a nice supported way to open up the hip flexor. And we did a lot of forward folding. So this feels real good. If your leg or legs are extended, go ahead and rebend them. And then push your feet down, lift your hips, and you can either remove your prop completely or you can push it toward your ankles so that it is under your knees. So if you have a bolster or a rolled blanket, you probably can do that, probably not with the block. And then just gently draw your knees in toward your chest. And it might feel good to just rock side to side or circle the knees, just finding a little bit of massage as you reconnect your lower back to the ground. Okay, so from here, we're going to come into our final relaxation posture. So my bolster is right in place. So if I extend my legs, I'm going to have the bolster under my knees, which is where I wanted it. So you can do that. If you feel like you need another spinal twist, you can do that. As you know, you can set up for relaxation in any posture that is calling your name, any sort of restorative, supported posture, or just corpse pose. Okay, we'll stay here for about 2 minutes. And settle in. In the next couple of breaths, allow your breath to deepen. Begin to invite just a little bit of movement back into your body. When you feel ready, you can bring yourself back to seated. I'm going to face forward. And we complete our practice together, bringing our hands together at our heart. And together we fold forward, sealing in your yoga practice. Namaste.